Hi, I'm Charlie Plow, transmitting from the beautiful port of Acapulco, Mexico. And this is my podcast. Today's theme: altered states of consciousness. We are the most conscious species in the world, and the only one to question our philosophical purpose in this reality. We have evolved to the utmost state of self knowledge as to create religions, superstitions, and other mind constructs. Our brain constantly tricks us to see and hear things that are not really there, called pareidolias, and to look for patterns in nature, called apophenias. We are always trying to make sense of the world, and we think, the most intelligent creatures on earth. We are also the most gullible. So let's go into Alice's rabbit hole. Welcome to Wonderland. Aldous Huxley, in his book The Doors of Perception, elaborates on his psychedelic experience under the influence of mescaline in May of 1953. Huxley recalls the insights he experienced, ranging from the purely aesthetic to the sacramental vision, and reflects on the philosophical and psychological implications. As Huxley famously said, if the doors of perception were purified, everything would appear to man as infinite. Based on his quote, Huxley assumes that the human brain filters reality so as not to let in all impressions and images, which would be impossible to process. According to his view, hallucinogenic drugs can reduce this filter and open these doors of perception, as he puts it metaphorically. To verify his theory, Huxley takes mescaline and writes down his thoughts and feelings. What he notices is that everyday objects lose their functionality and suddenly exist as such. Space and time becomes irrelevant, and perception seems to grow larger, overwhelming, and sometimes even offensive, because the individual is unable to cope with the enormous amount of impressions. By the way, you know the rock group The Doors? Well, Jim Morrison named it after the doors of perception. Carlos Castaneda, in his first book, The Teachings of Don Juan, A Yaqui Way of Knowledge, narrates the experiences of the author together with a Yaqui sorcerer and Nahual from the state of Sonora, Mexico, named Juan Matus, between 1960 and 1965. The book is divided into two sections. The first section, The Teachings. It's a first-person narrative documenting Castaneda's initial interaction with Don Juan using three types of psychotropic plants: peyote, tetoloache, and a mushroom from the family Psilocybe, probably Psilocybe mexicana. and the states of non-ordinary reality achieved through the consumption of said substances. In the second part of the book, the author performs a structural analysis seeking to reveal the cohesion and internal contingency of Don Juan's teachings. I'm sure Carlos Castaneda went on his trip after he read The Doors of Perception. Taisha Avelar, in her book Where the Sorcerers Cross, 1992, narrates she was instructed in this practice under the guidance of Don Juan Matus, the same teacher as Carlos Castaneda. In this work, she describes in detail her initiation and her training until reaching that crack between the worlds, through which sorcerers cross over to the other self. It also includes physical exercises and breathing techniques, as well as the theoretical explanations and the corresponding philosophical premises. Don Juan's warriors are divided into two complementary factions, dreamers and stalkers, depending on whether they have an innate facility for dealing with dreams or with facts. The corresponding basic practices are revere and recapitulation. Recapitulation is the art of reliving what has been lived, and it consists of the bodily recovery of all past experiences. Its practice allows healing wounds by recovering and redistributing one's own energy. It is a fundamental technique for any person, warrior or not, who is interested in following a process of self-liberation. Where the Sorcerer's Cross, by the way, is the best novel I have ever read. Now that we've reviewed some of the authors that have not only touched the subject, but immersed themselves in an experience of altered states of consciousness, we can talk about the many kinds of ways of lifting the veil between this reality and the true nature of the Matrix. Not only on drugs the philosopher lives on, he can enter the state with many other modes: starvation, thirst, meditation, prayer, music, near-death experiences, and many more. The brain is a tricky, complex quantum computer that not only uses the 5 known senses to interpret reality, but also makes up new senses and opens, for example, the third eye, a mystical, invisible eye, usually depicted as located on the forehead, which provides perception beyond ordinary sight. In Hinduism, the third eye refers to the Anja chakra. In both Hinduism and Buddhism, the third eye is said to be located around the middle of the forehead, slightly above the junction of the eyebrows, representing the enlightenment one achieves through meditation. Like in the god Shiva, the third eye refers to the gateway that leads to the inner realms and spaces of higher consciousness. In spirituality, the third eye is often associated with religious visions, clairvoyance, the ability to observe chakras and auras, precognition, and out-of-body experiences. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. The pineal gland is a small structure located on the roof of the diencephalon, parallel to the depiction of the third eye, but in the center of the brain, and its principal function is to play an important role of the circadian rhythm regulation, such as sleep-wake, besides secreting melatonin, a hormone with a strong effect on gonal action, and playing onostatic, geroprotector, and antioxidant roles. The pineal gland is linked to the third eye by various civilizations, like the most famous reference of the Eye of Horus in the Egyptian culture that compares if you cut a brain by the middle and you see the cross section of the pineal gland, it looks like the depiction of the Eye of Horus. Altered states of consciousness are not only a human trait. Many species of animals also like to consume all kinds of recreational drugs to enter the altered states of consciousness, like the lemurs and capuchin monkeys who bite without killing them, hallucinogenic millipedes, a type of centipede, to make them spray out toxic chemicals, including cyanide, which the lemurs and capuchin monkeys spread it all over their fur to repel malaria mosquitoes and other insects, but also enter a blissful state in giving them pleasure as a reward. In the Kavanga Basin in Africa, at high summer, the marula trees let go their ripe fruits, and all the animals that live there, like monkeys, elephants, wild pigs, ostriches, meat cats, and others, eat their fermented marula fruit from the ground and they get really drunk on it. In Australia and Papua New Guinea, the wallabies love to get high on opium puppies. Horses like to get stoned on loco weed, crazy weed, a plant that produces swainsonine, phytoxin harmful to livestock. Bees get wasted on fermented nectar and become alcoholics. Jaguars love to trip on Panisteropsis capi, a root found in the jungles of South America. Even dolphins bite on blowfishes to feel a rush with their venom. And many other animals have their own means to enter altered states of consciousness. In the brain, drugs can heighten or dull senses, change a person's level of alertness, and sometimes reduce physical pain. Because of the way drugs act on the brain, they negatively impact the ability to make sound decisions and healthy choices. Archaeological evidence indicates presence of psychoactive plants and drug use in early hominoid species about 200 million years ago. Paleogenetic evidence suggests we're exposed and adapted to substantial amount of dietary ethanol was approximately 10 million years ago. The way that the most famous modern drugs work today is very simple to explain. Cocaine, both freebase, crack, and powder cocaine, can cause long-term damage to mental health, which appears in the form of mood or emotional disturbances. Because the drug directly interferes with dopamine being reabsorbed by neurons, one of the symptoms of a cocaine come down is depression. If the brain does not reach its original equilibrium, then a person who has struggled with cocaine abuse for a long time may develop permanent depression and require ongoing mental health treatment. Other serious long-term changes to mood and mental health include auditory hallucinations, restlessness, paranoia, psychosis. People who have increased potential to develop psychosis or schizophrenia are more likely to trigger in this condition if they binge cocaine in powdered or freebase form. Cocaine increases stress hormones like cortisol in the brain, which can in turn raise blood pressure permanently, damaging the cardiovascular system. Even if the person does not develop psychosis or paranoia, they could develop anxiety, panic disorders, or problems with aggression or violence. Personal note, it gave me high blood pressure, and now I have to take my high blood pressure medicine every day for the rest of my life. MDMA is commonly known as ecstasy in a tablet form and Molly or Mandy in a crystal form. It's a potent empathogen, entectogen with stimulant properties primarily used for recreational purposes. The desired effects include altered sensations, increased energy, empathy, and pleasure. When ingested by the mouth, its effects begin in 30 to 45 minutes and last about 3 to 6 hours. Personal note, it's amazing. But I can't and I won't do it anymore. Don't try it at home, kids. Acid, LSD, is part of a class of drugs called hallucinogens. These are substances that can cause hallucinations. Hallucinations are things that you see, hear, or feel while awake that seem real, but instead are created by your mind. In other words, altered states of consciousness. LSD is the synthetic version of shrooms, hallucinatory mushrooms. The psychedelic drug or entheogen lysergic acid diethylamine LSD was first synthesized on November 16, 1938 by the Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann in Sandoz in Basel, Switzerland. Dr. Hofmann went on the most famous bike ride across the country on acid by touching his own invention and getting high on it. In other news, LSD influenced the music of the Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd, Jefferson Airplane, and the Beatles. If you need more info, Google it. By the way, that's why the Hoffman acid strips have a bike printed on them. I love LSD and all my trips on it, but I've decided to retire also from it. So I have great memories from those trips, but no more. Bye-bye, Miss American Pie. So bye-bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was right. Good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, this will be the day that I die. This will be the day that I die. The most benign of the most common drugs is marijuana or cannabis. Many people experience a pleasant euphoria and sense of relaxation. Other common effects, which may vary dramatically among different people, include heightened sensory perception, for example, to see brighter colors, laughter, altered perception of time, and increased appetite. I love feeling its effects, both smoked and in form of edibles, like brownies, cookies, and gummies. But I'm also retired from its use. It was good while it lasted. Another way to enter altered states of consciousness is through sleep paralysis, a state where you have temporary inability to move or speak
when falling asleep or getting up. Sleep paralysis occurs more often in people who have narcolepsy or sleep apnea, but it can affect anyone. Usually does not require medical attention. A self-diagnosis can usually be performed. Laboratory tests or diagnostic imaging studies are not required. In sleep paralysis, your brain can fool you, creating anthropomorphic patterns like beings, religious figures, ghosts, and or aliens that hunt you or abduct you, depending on your culture and your beliefs. Also can be induced in therapies with music or manipulations through speech, like the obsidian therapy, where they lie you on the ground and they put over your chest, stomach, and neck obsidian stones, and you close your eyes and listen to music specially designed to drug your senses and induced through speech images of god-like beings that are supposed to heal your soul. I've tried it and I saw 7 tall alien type beings around me, like if operating me, and felt overwhelmed by their presence.
Prophets. Saint John of Patmos. The last book of the Bible, the Apocalypse, was written by John in a revelation he had by Jesus Christ while he spent his days in a cave that gave out toxic fumes in the island of Patmos, entering the altered states of consciousness. Nostradamus. His prophetic work, The True Astrological Centuries and Prophecies, was published for the first time in 1555. Since then, his followers affirmed that he predicted all the most important catastrophes in the world. He worked preparing horoscopes for Queen Catherine de' Medici, predicted the death of Henry II, and was appointed physician to the royal court of Charles IX. His preparations and methods for prophecy used the technique of Branchus, prophet of Delphos, Greece, which involved sitting on a bronze tripod and looking into a bronze bowl filled with water with various oils and spices, therefore entering the altered states of consciousness. Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet. He was born on March 18, 1877 in Kentucky. He was a follower of the biblical passages, and his goal was to be a missionary. After being hypnotized by a man who came to his town to eliminate the hoarseness he suffered, he began to show signs that he could see the future. He foresaw the 2 world wars and other catastrophes, such as the awakening of the Etna volcano. He predicted that the 44th president of the United States would be black. He was referring to Obama. He was named the Sleeping Prophet because he had his prophecies while dreaming. The stoned ape theory. It's a controversial theory first proposed by the American ethnobotanist and mystic Terence McKenna in his 1992 book, Food of the Gods. The theory claims that the transition from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens and the cognitive revolution was caused by an addition of psilocybin mushrooms, especially the mushroom Psilocybe cubensis, into the human diet around 100,000 years ago. In his book, McKenna argued that due to the desertification of Africa, humans retreated into the shrinking tropical forest, following cattle herds whose dung attracted the insects that he states were certain a part of the human diet at the time. According to his hypothesis, humans would have detected psilocybe cubensis from this due to it often growing on cow paths. According to McKenna, access to and ingestion of mushrooms was an evolutionary advantage to humans, omnivorous hunter-gatherer ancestors, also providing humanity's first religious impulse. He believed that the psilocybe mushrooms were the evolutionary catalyst from which language, projected imagination, the arts, religion, philosophy, science, and all of human culture sprang. Gracias.
Sí, hasta luego.
Every trip, either if it's in the mind or in reality, has to end sometime. And this is the end of this one. In conclusion, altered states of consciousness are the origin and the medium of our intelligence and our connection to each other. This is just a small taste of the theme, but it's up to you to research more and make your own conclusions. Thanks for watching. If you liked this first video, please subscribe, share, and like, share, subscribe. See you soon. Charlie Plow.